in the interpretation. You must have seen the Vienna Convention. Vienna Convention, when it refers to the general rule of treaty interpretation in Article 31, it refers to not merely adherence to the text by the interpreter in good faith, requiring ordinary meaning to be given to the words used, to the terms indeed, as the expression goes, but also that natural ordinary meaning is to be given to the terms of a treaty in the context. Context refers to the terms of the treaty. If you see cases where interpretation has been an issue, you would find that context includes at least two things. It is of two kinds. That is what our experience tells us. The immediate context, which means the structural integrity of the text, where the terms to which the context refers to occurs. For instance, in a sentence, there is a context. If there is a clause, so first clause may not be seen in clinical isolation from the clause that follows it. We are not saying it is always relevant, but it may have relevance. At least it must be read before a meaning to the terms of the other clause may be determined. But the context also has a latent meaning, which is not immediate context, which is the latent context. And that is where you can see this meaning, this understanding of the context. What you can say, context in the strict sense and context in the liberal sense. Stricto sensu, as we call in Latin, or lato sensu, as we call it. And that understanding is very much inbuilt in the general rule of the treaty interpretation in Article 31 of the Vienna Convention. Because you find reference to text alongside the terms of the treaty. And then it further says that the context shall include, in addition to text, preamble, annexes, and then it enumerates two latent contexts, which are not immediate contexts. First, any agreement concluded by all parties in connection with the treaty in question while concluding the treaty. That is the first latent context. The second latest context, I am just telling you the terms of the Vienna Convention, Article 31. Any instrument concluded with reference to the treaty by one or more parties to the treaty. The difference between the two are, firstly, in the first case, the term agreement has been stated. The second relevant statement in the first latent context is all parties. In the second formulation, the word instrument has been used. We are not at this stage analyzing, we are merely stating, and then we will see through the cases. Instrument has been used, plus it does not refer to all parties. It refers to one or more, but not expressly at least all parties. Whereas in the first, it expressly refers to all parties and refers to not instrument but agreement. This is basically the theoretical basis of the Vienna Convention, the statement of the Vienna Convention about the context. Now let us see, because I have chosen some cases, and these cases are, I would say, would encompass all kinds of things in relation to context, in terms of development of the law, and also in terms of variety, tribunals, courts. So let us see each of these cases. The first case we should see is the case that was before the Permanent Court concerning postal service in the Free City of Danzig. That was an advisory opinion sought of the court by the League of Nations Council. Let us please try and understand what were the main facts of this case. Anyone who has the occasion of reading this, if you have not read it, please say it frankly, that's not a problem. If you have, please tell us, because if you have done some reading, we will make use of that. No idea. You have not read it? Anyone who has read this case? It's too difficult, too lengthy, too many things to do, too many things reading. I can understand that. You see, the first thing that you notice is, at the end of the judgment, that I should take from the below, there are a few very important things which were said in this case. It was an advisory opinion concerning the interpretation of one primary treaty, that is the Treaty of Versailles, Article 104, and two connected agreements, necessarily called agreements. One was called convention, another was called an agreement, connected to the main treaty. So these were the texts. The issue before the court was whether Poland had a right to establish postal services within the Free City of Danzig or beyond. Issue number one. Issue number two, whether to establish postal services, in other words, to open post offices, only for the purposes of official acts of Poland, official purposes, let us put it this way simply, official purposes, or also for the general public. These were the main, issues before the court in relation to interpretation of these agreements further confined to the context of the expression used in the treaty concerning these two issues. Let us see the arguments by parties. On behalf of the free city of Danzig, it was contended before the court that the court should strictly interpret the Versailles Treaty, the convention between Danzig and Poland, and the Warsaw Agreement, so as to confine postal services only within the free city of Danzig and for only official purposes. The main problem before the court as an interpreter of the treaty was that there wasn't only one instrument, one treaty which had to be interpreted. There was a main parent treaty to which were connected two treaties, two agreements. One was a convention, of course an agreement, which again had different articles. And then another treaty. So this was the structure. And it was in this context the court made certain very important observations. Firstly, the court said the issue of a liberal or strict interpretation arises only if there is some problem in the text of the treaty. If the words used in a treaty are clear, there is no occasion for the court to give liberal or strict interpretation. In other words, the treaty, none of these treaties were categorized in terms of liberal or strict. What is a liberal interpretation and what is strict interpretation, we know from the domestic law terminology and domestic approach of the domestic court, particularly common law courts, including Indian courts. But what the international court said in this case, that is not the point, whether we should give strict or liberal interpretation. The interpretation what we have to give to these instruments is that then we have to read each of these instruments in a context. That is where, and that is why this is a classic case on the interpretation of context before the conclusion of Vienna Convention. The court said we have to read each Article 104, Parent Treaty. Certainly we have to read that. What does it mean? Then we have to read the provisions of the convention too, and then we have to also read the Warsaw Convention. After reading these three treaties and different provisions relating to these two issues, the court came to the conclusion that Poland had a right to establish postal services not only within the free city of Danzig but outside of it, and there was no restriction on the Poland's right in this context by any instrument before the court, including by any understanding which was signed by one General Hacking on behalf of the free city of Danzig. The court also clarified, after reading the text of the convention and its different articles, that the Poland had this right to establish postal services not merely for official purposes but also for public purposes. So the court in this particular case clarified that if you approach the interpretation of a text from the standpoint of liberal or strict, what you basically do, you are already predisposed in favor of one or the other interpretation before actually reading the text and before actually determining whether there is any gaps in the treaty. So the court simply discarded rejected the arguments of in behalf of the Free City of Tanzim of any liberal or strict interpretation. What it said was that we have to read the treaties in context. One treaty, one provision was required to be read in the context of another, if only all these three agreements had bearing on the issue before the court. So that was a very important case before the Vienna Convention. This is one general understanding that the duty of the tribunal, duty of the interpreter is to read the text in a context. And the context may be the immediate context where the contentious term is occurring. It may be a latent context where the meaning is to be sought conclusively, also in light of the interpretation of connected, related, ancillary agreements or instruments. The second issue, the second case was, as far as the context was concerned, the very famous Pinochet case and the torture convention. Anybody who had the time to read anything of the torture convention?
Sir, actually, Augusto Pinochet, he was a Chilean dictator, and he was accused by the Spanish judge for torture or conspiracy to torture. And he claimed immunity, that I am immune, and he was and the UK court, it tried to subject him to the criminal jurisdiction of United Kingdom on the basis of the crime of torture. But later on, there were accusations of biasness to an international NGO of the judges in the first and second case. And in the third case, the court held that in his official capacity, he can claim the immunity, but for the crimes of torture and conspiracy of torture, he cannot claim exemption or immunity because after the ratification of the convention, the international convention.
Good. Because it's very complex. These proceedings were not one proceeding. But let me tell you the reason why. Because we are not reading these cases otherwise than for the purposes of our class. We may read this case. This is not a class on torture convention, not on Pinochet case. We have a very specific agenda, very specific purpose that we are reading. The specific purpose that we had in mind was the interpretation of the term public official occurring in the torture convention. If you see, one thing that you might notice, and here was one case where perhaps some of the best lawyers in the world argued the case. Professor Brownlee was there, the then Professor Greenwood, now a judge, was there. Yeah, James Cameron. These were the people who argued this case before the House of Lords. This was not argued for the first time. Please note that this was argued second time. When there was accusation that the first committee of the House of Lords earmarked for hearing of this case was not properly constituted. See, in order to dispel any doubts and credibility of the House of Lords, the committee was reconstituted, and then this case was before the House of Lords. What was argued? Let me tell you the factual summary he has provided, but just to little clarify the issue of the little facts. there was an arrest warrant issued, you see, extradition warrant issued by the court in Spain, and the issue before the House of Lords was first that whether he was accused of a crime also within the meaning of UK law, because you had to satisfy two very fundamental propositions in any extradition proceedings. First, the issue of a double criminality, in the sense that the extradition seeking country and the country from where it is sought must, through judicial process as a matter of law, believe that there is an act which is a crime in both countries, so which is double criminality, criminal where proceedings have originated and from where it is sought. And then the principle of spatiality. That wasn't the issue in this case, but it is general. The issue was whether he was a public official, and then if he was, whether he was entitled to immunity. That was, in fact, most of the discussion before the House of Lords was on this issue, whether he was entitled to immunity being a former head of the state. But primarily, the question to which we are concerned in our discussion is whether the issue of whether he was a public official, because it was contended by his lawyers that he was not. Indeed, if you see at least one lord, Lord Hope, while agreeing tacitly that he was, but wished rather, that the law had made it explicit that the term public official would also include a former head of state. Now, House of Lords, there was agreement amongst all lords on this issue that the meaning of the public official is contextual. And in the context of the Torture Convention, the term public official includes a former head of a state. There is neither any express exclusion in favor of a former head of a state, nor any implicit exception on the basis of any reasonable interpretation which may be given by House of Lords to the term public official. So, House of Lords, before coming to the conclusion that the meaning of the term public official is contextual, and on the basis of the meaning of the contextual meaning of public official, a former head of state was a public official. It also used the expression that the public official, the term public, I am quoting, this is a statement, the term public official naturally includes a head of a state, unquote. The critical word is naturally. Vienna Convention, natural meaning. In other words, this statement, more specifically, that naturally includes, goes even beyond the contextual meaning. Even if, you see, what does it mean? It means that even if the term was incapable of being given a contextual interpretation and hence would have included a head of a state, the term in its natural meaning includes a head of a state. This is beside the point whether this is an uncontroversial or incontestable interpretation that the term public official naturally includes a head of a state. That is beside the point. It wasn't argued, contested before the House of Lords, and we need not get into it. But the point is this: it is certainly incontestable that contextually it includes a head of state. And that is what you see. In the facts of the case, there was hardly any doubt about it. The main point was, after the ratification of this convention, there was no possibility of excluding a head of the state from the definition of public official in relation to as serious a crime as torture. Because in the definition, it is not merely consensual, which is, in other words, not merely on the basis of the consent, but acquiescence. So, in other words, that's a very broad. Even if there is no evidence that this Mr. Pinochet had consented to torture, but if there was evidence that in the wake of evidence of torture, he did not object, acquiesced, he accepted, he kept quiet, silence. So it's very different. So in this particular case, and it is true. You see, if I may give you the analogy of several other, for instance, our Indian Penal Code, or several other, you see, acts where public official, public servant, or public and then any functionary is defined. What you can say is this: certainly the meaning that you have to give to public authority, public official, public servant is basically in the context of the law where the term is referred. True, the lawyers of Mr. Pinochet, obviously, lawyers had to save him by all kinds of arguments, including this argument that he was a public official, and public official, I mean, heads of state may not be termed as public official. So he was not included. I mean, they argued that it is wrong for the House of Lords to have done so. But then there was no dissent on this point, only a semblance of reservation, what we can say, because Lord Hope, one Lord, wanted it to be explicit. That is what he said. Not that he did not agree with other lords, that it included. And there was no dissent about it, no reservation about it. So you can see that a term, for instance, a public servant, it may not have an automatic or a natural or readily comprehensible meaning, but it certainly has a meaning in the context in which it appears. And in the case such as this, in the context of the Torture Convention, the public official was found to have included a former head of the state. Then, you see, Vienna Convention also refers to, in the immediate context, as you can see, which has been specifically referred to, is preamble to a treaty, to an agreement, to any instrument, or the text. The preamble of the text, because it is clearly referred. So the context includes, in addition to the text, preamble and annexes. Those two show the category that you will come later by way of example. Well, preamble has been, it is almost always, as I told you in the very first class, however named, it may not be named always as a preamble, but it is always there before the operational terms of a treaty and agreement are included. It basically sets forth the objectives of the drafters, of the parties to a treaty, or the parliamentarians, legislators, whatever, in the context of any legislation which they wanted to achieve. In a nutshell, it is basically the aims, aspirations, or objectives of the text. aims, objectives, or aspirations. Certainly objectives. The direction. Whereas the operational parts are the specific methods of attaining those objectives. That is what the importance of a preamble is. In the context of, you see, in the domestic context, you must have, read, at least heard, Keshav Nanda Bharati case, as far as the importance of a preamble is concerned, in the context of the Indian Constitution. So that is a very well-known case, which that case we are not referring here, because that is, I'm sure most of Indian students are otherwise aware of. If you have questions, we will certainly take it up for discussion. The case that I have, alongside, here you have the general, all other students may have certainly interest, is a case that was decided by the WTO. This case was a shrimp turtle case, and there were two agreements in relation to the interpretation of, in relation to this particular case. One was the preamble to the WTO agreement, and the text was Article 20 XX, paragraph G of GATT, captioned as general exception. So now let us see the operation of the Vienna Convention on interpretation. We had a text on the basis of which parties had contentious positions. Article 20, paragraph G. Then we had another text, that is the WTO agreement. More specifically for our discussion, the preamble to the WTO agreement. And then we had this case, this particular tribunal, particular people, the division of the appellate body, which interpreted this. May I hear from you if you have read something on this case, something about it? Yes.
So it was basically a dispute referred to WTO regarding US contention of putting ban on the import of the turtle, the method they used to. US has put ban, and 4 countries, India, Pakistan, Thailand and Malaysia, put their grievances before WTO that this ban was unjustified because US applied TED principle, that on one hand US was furnishing help to the Caribbean states regarding same matter and they were entertaining, and on the other hand they are asking not to import the turtle or shrimp in order, and there was enactment in US Endangered Species Act under which regarding environmental concern to save the species of the turtle, and for that United States took the rescue that in order to save environment and that turtle species they are putting the ban.
Actually, sir, United States
Very good. Yes.
it imposed restrictions on the import of turtle which were caught by means of devices not using TED nets, turtle excluding devices net, and USA certainly took the excuse of Article 20G, which provides for protection of environment and nature, natural resources, by imposing those restrictions.
And it utilized the exception clause of 20G, under which it was mentioned that any country can make regulation with regard to that it satisfied that exception clause with regard to agreement.
Very good. Yes.
I think it was shrimp. Basically, the shrimp was bought by India, Malaysia in a system in which turtle was also taken. So US itself within its territorial water and within its area of sea banned for catching those turtle. And I think USA also applied a method by which the shrimp used to be caught without affecting the turtle. So that was the point. Under the public law USA banned the importing of shrimp importing of shrimp from a country which is catching those in a system where turtle are also affected. That was the main.
Good factual background. But we want something more, well specific to our discussion. Let us find out some more relevant facts from the statement of facts which our friends have stated. Let us concentrate on context and treaty interpretation. From the background, let's try and pick up those.
The conflict was also about the preamble to WTO states about sustainable development. So, how far we are in consonance with it? Further, Article 20G provides for exhaustible natural resources. So, there was a contention that was put forth that whether sea turtles amount to exhaustible natural resources.
That is a very good statement because it's very close to the point. Indeed, it's very heart of the point. This last statement which he made, whether turtle amounted to exhaustible natural resources, that was the very heart of the problem. In the context of which the appellate body, in order to resolve, because this was a contentious point, in order to resolve this contentious issue, the appellate body had to conclusively resort for its interpretation to the preamble to the WTO agreement. And now we take up the whole issue. You see, the issue was this. The United States had enacted a law called Section 609, whereby it decided to impose a ban on importation of shrimp, which is a seafood, to the United States from those countries which had employed a method of shrimp farming which necessarily killed turtles. Full stop. First important part. Second, relying further on that Article 20, paragraph G, which states that measures to conserve exhaustible natural resources may be taken by a member if made effective in conjunction with measures taken on the domestic front. That domestic front is an issue of non-discrimination. But the point is, conservation of exhaustible natural resources, as we say. Conservation of exhaustible. The critical word was, the adjective that was an issue was exhaustible. If you find out from the standpoint of grammar, it was this adjective. That was the point of contention, the very heart of the problem. Because United States relied on exhaustible term and had considered turtles to be exhaustible natural resource, which India and other countries disputed. You could see in the discussion of the appellate body report that it also made a reference not merely to the preamble to the WTO agreement, but in order to ascertain the correctness of its own interpretation, it had also referred to the preamble to the GATT agreement. And now let us see GATT agreement's preamble and WTO's agreement preamble on this issue, and let us see the contrast. GATT agreement's preamble, drafted in 1947, had read in the relevant part: full use of natural resources. Full use of natural resources. In 1994, when preamble to the WTO agreement was drafted, the full had become optimal, optimum use of natural resources. And then further it says, consistently with sustainable development. Sustainable development of countries at different levels of economic development. Now, after comparing these two preambles and finding in one preamble the full use of natural resources, whether or not it was exhaustible, but certainly natural resource. Natural resources were allowed full use in 1947. In 1994, optimum, not full. You may debate what is the meaning of optimum with economists, and they certainly may be disagreement. But the very fact that it is not full, one. Two, there wasn't anything sustainable in 1947. There was in 1994. Then the appellate body, in its report, if I remember, you read paragraph 181 to 185 or through some 3, 4, 5 paragraphs, where you find this expression. After having done this, the appellate body concluded that the meaning of the term exhaustible is not static, it is evolutionary. After doing this survey, after doing this research, then it comes to the conclusion. Because, see, and then it clarified its approach in academic terms also. It also tells you that is sometimes, I mean, the approach of international bodies as compared, that is a general remark I can make, certainly with our Indian experience, is much more academic. They also tell you why are they doing it. They also help you as a researcher. It had been before most of the national court, they won't tell you why they do it. It told you in terms of in the language of the Vienna Convention also. It clearly said, look, preamble is a context. And we refer to the preamble to determine the meaning of exhaustion. Because one party was arguing that a resource which may be replicated cannot by logic be exhausted. It did not refer specifically to law of the sea convention, but then you see where you have exclusive economic zone and the extent to which it may be exploited, there is a concept of maximum sustainable yield fishing resources. So it is not that you see a resource which may be replicated may be exploited to any extent. So you have to ensure that the minimum sustainable yield should be referred even in the context of fishing. There is a concept that wasn't referred there, that's a different story. But it reaches the same conclusion by reading the preamble to the WTO. Now it clearly said that preamble is a context of GATT Article 20, paragraph G, because this GATT Article 20G remains unchanged. What was in 1947 remained the same after 1994. Now, what was changed? It was basically the preamble. What did change in the language of the Vienna Convention? The context. It was the context. That is, here you can see very clearly as a lawyer, the same term had acquired a different meaning. In other words, so different a meaning that something which is semantically speaking, as a matter of language, exhaust, was read as evolution. And even a thing, even a resource which may be replicated was considered exhaustible. Why? Because the context had changed. The context of 1947 was full use of natural resources. The context of 1994 was optimum use of resources consistently with sustainable development. So you had optimum, you had sustainable. Development was permissible as long as it could be sustained. So that is the difference. So the same word may acquire in the same regime. It was also international trade regime, the same international body, and altogether a different understanding. But here you can see it was a different understanding given by the WTO. We are not getting into at this level, and we can certainly argue whether this is a good interpretation or bad interpretation. Is a question. I mean, as far as on jurisprudential debate, I would say you read Ronald Dworkin. On this point, I think he has referred to this issue, he has addressed this issue. The question of correctness is always, in some measure, connected with the issue of its correctness. So, whether an interpretation is good or bad was always there. People would certainly say whether it is good or bad. That is certainly a different question. But it's a different question. It is a related question, we agree, but it's a different question that we must also agree. Here we are saying yes. So you use this context, you can see. Now you can see that there is alongside GATT. Now what was GATT Article 20? GATT Article 20G was one agreement. This particular provision was occurring in a distinct agreement. It itself says General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Context was occurring in an agreement which was a different agreement. It's named Marrakesh Agreement establishing the World Trade Organization. It's a different agreement. So you can see it is not there that the context is to be found necessarily and always within the same agreement, much less within the same clause or provision.
Just one thing, like if you are saying that even the context can be found in another area, is it because the WTO itself is bound only within its framework all agreements? Because this is the nature of WTO, in that it is bound by the framework of WTO agreements. Now, if I take any environmental agreement or any other agreement, then I think this interpretation will vary.
Actually, sir, the WTO agreement established, the Marrakesh agreement establishing WTO, it was the main agreement, and these were the annexures, the GATS, GATT, and TRIPS, all these, and DSP. All these were annexures. So it was a part of WTO. That may be a reason that the parties refer preamble to WTO agreement rather than referring preamble to GATT. They must also have referred the preamble of GATT. But they referred WTO agreement's preamble because it was the main agreement establishing WTO.
Yes, no doubt about it. what you can say is the parent, just as in the postal service case, the parent agreement was the Treaty of Versailles. The specific articles relied on by Poland were, you see, 4 or 5 provisions of the convention between them. Similarly, you can say that WTO agreement was the parent agreement to which was annexed the GATT agreement. Fine. I think he had a different question. I think he is pointing beyond, you see, a larger thing.
My point
I
was
could understand.
WTO, what we understand is the panel or appellate body is bound by the covered agreements of WTO. In WTO, we have to ensure that the violation of any of the agreements of WTO has been occurred, and that's why the party went to WTO. I mean, it has its own framework. My question is like, in this case, we see that the context is taken from a preamble of a different agreement within WTO. Now, if I extend this analogy that the context of different agreement can also be relevant beyond the WTO regime, like in
That is
environment.
what I was telling you. This is precisely what I said when he was asking this question. Obviously, he was not asking such a simple thing that within. What he is saying is this: whether the context may extend to an agreement which is not a covered agreement, which is not a WTO agreement, is a very good question. But if you see the Vienna Convention, it is possible. In connection, you see, any agreement which is concluded in connection with that agreement. If there is an agreement, let us see if parties, all or one or more parties have also agreed on any other agreement in connection with the conclusion of the WTO agreement, then that will also, you see, the context will also extend to that. If it is not in connection with the conclusion, you see, the treaty language is, I repeat it, please read Vienna Convention and these expressions. They are common in clause 2A and B. I repeat it. Any agreement or instrument connected with the conclusion of the agreement. Connected with the conclusion. Connected with the conclusion, not connected with the agreement. Connected with the conclusion. So operative, please see the operative now. Connected with the conclusion of the agreement, not connected with the agreement. Now, if as long as that is satisfied, certainly that will be. But I think we still have a major concern, and the most important debate within the WTO is not that. Had it been that, the debate would not have been so much. If there is an agreement within the WTO, the debate is beyond. You see the WTO agreement, the extent to which WTO may rely on other WTO agreements to read into it. Shall we continue for 5 minutes, then we go for break, or shall we go immediately? I could see tea outside and he's sleeping in.
Why don't you just continue with this particular aspect?
This particular aspect I should conclude. The point is, this was a point which was raised before the WTO in the very first appellate body report that was given by the WTO. That is the gasoline case. And let me also tell you, very interestingly and very relevantly for our discussion, in that case also, GATT Article 20 was involved. In that, paragraph G was involved. United States was involved. A developing country was involved. Obviously, WTO was involved. Now, in that case, WTO appellate body made a very significant, of course, whether it is an abstract statement, but a very significant statement the WTO appellate body made. The statement was, the WTO law is not a self-contained regime. The WTO law may not be seen in clinical isolation from public interaction. This is a statement I am quoting, and I remember correctly, this is written at page 17 of the appellate body report, WTDS 2. 1998 report, where it states WTO law may not be seen in clinical isolation from public international law.
In fact, sir, I think recently this China raw materials case, China argued that KSNR is a part of customary law, and the same argument was like Article 20, de-exhaustible natural resources. On that point, the panel was of the view that customary international law is applicable in WTO.
Yes, in fact, there is a further reference also. This is not merely a reference by the appellate body whose authority it is to merely interpret, but not to make, at least theoretically, law. If you see the law itself, Article 3, paragraph 2 of the DSU clearly states, that is a treaty text, that the provisions of the WTO shall be clarified in accordance with the rules of public international law, to which we always meet Vienna Convention. And WTO appellate body has always used Vienna Convention specifically, namely using provisions, articles, clauses. Nobody ever objected, why are you referring to Vienna Convention?
Just repeat this, say, repeat this.
The provisions of the WTO shall be clarified in accordance with the customary rules of interpretation of public international.
They use the word interpretation. They use the word.
Interpreted, clarified.
But it says that it shall be interpreted or the interpretation according to public interpretation.
Shall be clarified in accordance with the rules of interpretation of public international.
They use the word the rules.
Rules of public international.
Interpretation. They use the word rules of interpretation.
Rules of, that is,
Or rules of
and
interpretation.
maybe there may be a slight, you see, one word here or there occurring, but the text is not before me, but it is absolutely.
This is a very important issue, and I would suggest use 5 minutes to get that precise provision. If they are talking of rules of international law, that it accrues really extraordinary proportion, then you can't bring it just confining to Vienna Convention. And if they are talking of rules of interpretation, then I can understand it. But my impression is, and please correct me, I will also go and check within the next 5 minutes. My impression is that it is in accordance with the rules of international.
Rules of, customary rules of interpretation.
International. And in that case, you bring the entire body of international law into picture. Why VCL? Because if you confine it to Vienna Convention, there is a, you see, Vienna Convention is not substantive. Vienna Convention is secondary. Here, focus is not on secondary, focus is on substantive. When we talk of context, we are not talking of secondary, we are talking of substantive. My impression is that context need to be understood beyond the terms of Vienna Convention. In that case, the entire body of international law, as determined by the body concerned, and then whole debate that we are talking about this agreement or umbrella agreement or parent agreement and all that, that interpretation becomes a very narrow interpretation. If the provision is that bodies shall interpret the provisions of the agreement in accordance with the rules of public international law, which in my view is the right formulation, is not wrong. In that case, you open the entire regime for intervention of external rules. Again, one can question whether it's right or wrong, but what is critical is to find out whether the engagement with external rules is confined to the rules of interpretation, or engagement with external rules goes beyond the rules of interpretation. I can't say anything now. Until I read the text and get, unless anyone of you has the text. This is the.
Is the internet working here?
Yeah. So, is it the provision of BCLP?
No. I have in my pen drive, but I have to go up.
We are not,
That is
BCLP is not an issue. Issue is
Internet is working.
the WTO agreement.
But in the break, I'll see it. We break
Have a cup of tea in the meantime.
and we'll see. My impression is that it is use of internet. Paragraph 2, where you can see that it is to be clarified provisions of those agreements in accordance with customary rules of interpretation. So the operative noun here is interpretation, not public international law. What has made, you see, these issues contentious is basically the result, the observations and interpretations of the substantive provisions given by the appellate body, and that very observation which I cited you from the very first appellate body report, that the WTO law may not be seen in clinical isolation from public interaction. So what we are saying is this: what is not operative here became operative from that appellate body report, and therefore one can say that Mustafa is pointing out the context in a given case is not by the understanding of the appellate body, is not by the understanding of the WTO understanding that is in front of you, may extend beyond the umbrella agreement of WTO, beyond the annexed agreement to umbrella agreement, but even it may go beyond. For instance, as Sir is pointing out, sustainable development, for instance. Now, where do you get the meaning of sustainable development? Can you get the meaning of sustainable development from any of the annexed agreements to the WTO agreement? You tell me which agreement of the WTO defines or gives any clue of defining sustainable development. What is the concrete, what is the incontestable meaning? You have seen from the studies that we are doing a term called public official, which is very well known. I think in almost every country you have some law where this term occurs. But when we were talking about 1996, this was 1998, the panel report was given, even the appellate body report came on 2nd October 1998, this shrimp turtle case. The dispute started in 1996 itself. Sustainable development. Where did you get this term?
So the sustainable development concept came in 1987 by Burnett Company.
We are aware. See, that is not a problem. Our common future that we went for. A book. You see the interpretive value of a book? We are talking of agreements. We are talking of law. If a concept has been discussed in a book, we know, you see, even in the statute of the ICJ, teaching of the most highly qualified publicist of the day as a subsidiary means for the determination of point of law. So you can see, they are subsidiary means. Teachings, writings, published books, certainly publications would include books. So we have no offense to you see that book. The question here is there any reference made? This is, and from that point of view, that is what he has asked the question. Is a very comprehensive question that he has asked. It's not asked a very narrow question. It's a very valid question. It's one of the most contentious debates, ongoing debates in international economic law. Of course, we are approaching this not from a trade and environment debate sort of thing. We are approaching it through other way. We are doing it from the study of interpretation. But nevertheless, that is an issue. So if you include as context an agreement which is beyond the agreement of the regime, then the question arises, how do you interpret it? Sustainable development, tell me, how do you interpret it? That is one thing, you see, one thing is very clear. Appellate body saw the difference. Indeed, it was basically a definition by comparison of two preambles. One preamble referred to full, other referred to optimum. One preamble referred to resources without any qualifying adjective. The other preamble referred to resources by a qualifying adjective called sustainable. There is a difference. What you can say, simply because a noun has an adjective doesn't mean that the adjective has an incontestable meaning. The presence of an adjective implies that some meaning is to be given. But it does not mean that the meaning which has been given is incontestable. The fact that it is not full, it is optimum. The fact that it is not resources, it is development, it is sustainable. The question is, from where did you get the meaning of sustainable? We did not get this meaning from the annexed agreements to the WTO agreement or the WTO agreement itself. And if you say that if you got from outside, whether specific references were made, yes, there were references to agreements, instruments outside of the WTO regime in the WTO appellate body and panel reports. Brundtland report or Rio declaration or these kinds of instruments they were referred to, and when they interpreted it, they certainly had these instruments in their mind. But they did not at least expressly admit it, that their understanding of the word sustainable was premised on the basis of one or the other text of to which the parties have agreed elsewhere, not necessarily. That is one question. The second question is, from the interpretation point of view, is whether these texts, for instance, Rio Declaration, or for that matter, that report, that book, first of all, is a book an instrument? If it is, was it written or published in connection with the conclusion of WTO agreement? Or for that matter, where there is no disagreement about the normative nature of the instrument, for instance, declaration, treaties, Agenda 21, whatever principles, were they concluded in connection with the conclusion of WTO treaty? If they have not, then what was the legal basis for the WTO to have even implicitly relying on these instruments for the interpretation of the text which was expressly contentious before the WTO. That is the heart of the debate. That is where you have trade environment debate. To what extent can you rely on general international environmental law agreements for the interpretation of WTO agreement? And it is in that context the linkage that we find in the jurisprudence of the appellate body. That is, clinical isolation may not be seen in clinical isolation. That was said in January 1996. January 1996 it was. It was not the only issue. I think there are several other cases. Several. For instance, the softwood lumber case, where the WTO relied on the international responsibility, law of responsibility, and work of International Law Commission, draft articles, countermeasures. Another case, there was a case between European community was involved in cotton textile case with India, WTDS 34 case, where WTO relied on the concept of essential parties, relied on a decision of another international body, that is the International Court of Justice, relied on Nauru case, relied on some other cases. So it is basically, if you see the practice has not been necessarily and literally in conformity with the text of this Article 3.2. So what Sir was saying is exactly is the practice, even if textually the law doesn't go, the operative noun doesn't go beyond interpretation. Textually, the practice is, it is public international law. And it clearly said, indeed, our paragraph page 17 that I'm sure you read WTO, but it clearly says, it may not be seen from clinical, one of the most profound statements ever made by the WTO on the linkage between, on the extent of operation and reference, adherence by the WTO to other general international law, to international law outside of WTO umbrella agreement and WTO agreement annexed to the umbrella agreement. So this is how you can see the preamble was used as a context, and on the basis of the term sustainable development, however it was interpreted, there is no clear, it doesn't say what is the meaning. There is an article by Professor Chimney that I remember, who was published in Indian Journal of International Law, I think 1999, I don't remember correctly the year, but Indian Journal, United Nations General Assembly resolution, that is a radical interpretation. And there he has made some observation. And if I recall what he said, was he was saying that it is an indeterminate concept. It is a vacuous concept. It means all things to all people. The concept implies, on the one hand, that there must be intergenerational equity, but the concept does not include intragenerational equity. In fact, he was commenting on a book by Professor Nico Schreiber on this particular aspect. So if you want to read further, one reference that came to my mind is this. So you can further refer to it. So many writings on this particular issue. But our purpose is not go to beyond interpretation. So you can see it may very well be very contentious. And sometimes, yes sir.
Difficult not to get provoked because I know There are so many things which are generally not discussed, but many people get impression which is a wrong impression and which should not continue. Take this particular example which is just discussed, and you come to know how challenging to use a soft term and how dangerous to use an accurate term the situation is. You have a provision relating to sustainable development. You have an opinion about sustainable development. Indeterminate, vacuous, includes something which is important, excludes something which is more important. What conclusion will you draw? Conclusion will draw is the sustainable development is useless concept. There is no difficulty about drawing this conclusion. Now, if you draw this conclusion that sustainable development is a useless concept, even if it is true, and let us assume for the sake of argument that it is true, how it is going to help you? Will it disappear from the WTO agreement text because it is useless? Because by your clinical analysis you have reached a conclusion that it is useless. Then you think it has become useless. The fact is that this useless within inverted commas is a very important part of the WTO agreements. And it applies to, you are talking of shrimp and turtle case. You mentioned about the other cases also. This concept becomes relevant in a large number of cases. It's not just in pure environmental cases. It may become relevant in the context of trade matters also. I can't cite any case because I am not as familiar as you are. But I have no difficulty in citing a situation which you can address from the angle of sustainable development. Like a country which has export-oriented economy, and if that export is dependent on exploitation of its resources, then the whole concept of development is dependent on the export earnings. And then you can say, well, you care for development, or you care for environment, we care for development, and our livelihood depends on export earnings. So, your intellectual contribution does not help resolve the problem. Intellectual contribution per se does not help resolve the problem. So you have reached one conclusion, that is a very profound conclusion, there is no doubt about this, that you have an indeterminate concept. But what is beyond that? What is the next? In the scheme of international law, things don't stop by making one assessment. Things go beyond it. When you say this law is useless, then what's the meaning of that? Should you keep quiet? Now this law is useless? You should go beyond that. That means there should be a debate about what to do with this useless concept. And since there is no better concept in place, you live with this useless concept. And since you have to live with this useless concept, you have to make best use of this useless concept. And what is the best use of useless concept? Study it well, question that interpretation that is coming from that part of the world, which gets away with their policy prescriptions at the cost of others, and expand the concept so that it takes care of both intergenerational and intergenerational equity. It's not that if concept in the past was interpreted in a particular way, that concept cannot be interpreted in a different way tomorrow. The challenge is how to bring intergenerational equity within the domain of sustainable development. So it is not that approach, a pathological approach. You got to a pathological test, and that person who conducted the test says that you have iodine deficiency, you have this deficiency, and you have this deficiency, and you feel, yeah, now you got the report. With that report, you go to the doctor and you say, well, I have this deficiency, please tell me what should be the medicine for it.
And this is what the challenge of WTO litigation is all about.
Don't remain bogged down with that state of interpretation which is adversarial to you because you could not shape the proceedings of past lawmaking. Challenge is whether you can shape the proceedings of future so that the inequities could be corrected. That was the spirit of New International Economic Order. That's the spirit of entire body of international law. If we remain a critique of what is wrong with international law, then probably you are doing something which is extremely important, but probably you are leaving an agenda unmet, which is the basic agenda of humanity. To offer better scenario where you can promote interest of those people about whom you care. And here comes the role of interpretation. Because you can't knock out the term sustainable development from the text of the WTO agreements, the only opportunity left for you is to see that this interpretative process is used to take care of those inequities which are inherent in the text, in the whole spirit of the law that we have in place. That is what the challenge is. And this challenge needs to be met with more work rather than rejecting what exists in the form of existing provisions. This is true with practically every branch of international law. You dislike it, you hate it, it is not in your interest, and you want to be away from it. That is not to settle the question. You dislike it, you hate it, but you have to be with it because you can't get away from it. I'm not sure whether an approach based on a critique of a concept would serve the purpose unless you follow it with an approach to develop that concept. And all concepts in law have been developed. You take any concept of property for instance is developed. We used to talk of tangible property, then people started talking of intangible property, then people started talking of intellectual property, and I'm sure in future you will have many more developments in the field of property. Same thing about foods, same thing about human rights, same thing whatever you talk about. And if that is the spirit of development of different concepts, I would suggest any concept that is a troubling concept in WTO agreements. Sustainable development happens to be the one which we are concerned with. Any concept that happens to be a troubling concept for developing countries, in particular because they are at the receiving end, then it is incumbent upon the people who are doing WTO law and also others. I won't say that it's their responsibility only. By force you have to work on sustainable development. Only then you can take care of the problem in WTO law. Likewise, every concept that is a troubling concept in WTO law has to be dealt with by the people who may not be doing WTO law. And compulsion is because you can't amend the agreement. For that you need a new round of negotiation, which is unlikely to take place. And whatever the round you are going to have, at least in the foreseeable future, a concept like sustainable development are not going to disappear, whether you like them or you don't like them. It's like a government which we don't like, but which is there, and we can't throw it away because there are no elections in the near future. So we have to wait until next elections. So then you can throw it out. The message is, that is important, the message is that when you find something useless as a concept, you have to ascertain whether I can live with this assessment or I should go beyond this assessment. If you can afford to leave that assessment, if you can abandon that concept, then fine, no problem. Like you go to a market to buy a product, you don't like it, you leave it. You come back home, no problem. But what about that product which is fixed on your body and you can't remove it? So it is that kind of situation we have. We have large number of terms in all bodies of law. Law of the sea. This is not a new term, it is borrowed from the law of the sea. Optimal utilization of resources, sustainable, all these come in. I did not deliberately bring that to your notice. And it's very dangerous scenario. If I was the devil's advocate and sitting in that position, I would have brought whole law of the sea jurisprudence, whole law relating to fisheries into the context of this case, which is a very, very powerful body of law. Turtle I treat like a fish. Shrimp and turtle, they are governed by the same rules that you should optimum utilization. This
That
advantage.
is there, MSY is there.
Yes.
That is what we said. The concept is there in law of the sea.
Law of the sea. The result is the entire law of the sea is into WTO law. And you can't simply ignore it.
You see, the word sustainable is there in law of the sea.
Law of the sea.
Development, you see, maximum sustainable yield. The concept of MSY is there in relation to the exploitation of fisheries in exclusive economic zone. So the extent to which you can exploit fisheries.
And there's another interesting aspect that a large number of concepts in the law of the sea are developed by beyond the law of the sea. That's another interesting. So when you read sustainable development in WTO agreements, then you can go to Brundtland Commission, Law of the Sea Convention, and so many cases. And when you go there, then you go somewhere else. So that's what the scenario today is. And that is what the challenge is. The research has become very challenging. You can't stop it here. You can't stop doing research on shrimp turtle case by reading WTO agreements. You have to go beyond it.
You just begin with it.
You begin with it.
Where to end. Thank you, sir. So you see that is, I don't have to add anything. It's very useful, you see, points that sir has made. Now let us go. These are some examples where I'm not, you see, I'm not aware of cases. You see, Afghanistan, Bonn Agreement. These are the agreements which I forwarded to you so that you can just have a look at it. These are not intended to be read so you see closely because we do not have any adjudication in relation to these. You have Afghanistan, this agreement, Bonn Agreement. There you could see Annex 1 to 4. Now, this is one example where the context of this Bonn Agreement, you see, in relation to the government that was intended to be set up before President Karzai took over in Afghanistan, there were appended these 4 annexes.
You can tell them the context. The context was that after the 9/11, when the US attacked
Afghanistan. You see, 9/11, you are aware, you see, and it was their perception that this originated, I'm saying this to perception, I have no fact, you see, findings which I may refer. And subsequently, they attacked Afghanistan, and the question was, ultimately, they had to find some semblance of governance, and in that context, before the Americans could leave the governance which they had for some time established after attacking it, they had established this this administration, and this was basically known as the Bonn Agreement in relation to concerning the administration of Afghanistan. Now, there were several parties. You see, it's very interesting if you see it. There were a number of parties. Hardly and I'm not aware, in fact, when I read it only then I am aware of there's so many groups, all groups, they are parties to it. And after having agreed to the articles of the agreement, they could not agree without annexes. So in other words, the annexes were not articles, and yet without articles, without annexes, and agreements could not have reached on articles. So annexes are there for the purposes of the interpretation of the articles which were agreed. I think this is basically, unless you have seen negotiations, unless you have seen the minutes, verbatim records of agreement, it is not always possible to find out precisely why a particular provision was made as an annex and not as an article. This is one approach, at least people who have read, I mean even the WTO text, in fact this GATT agreement is now an annex, because to parent agreement just as in WTO agreement, these are annexes. So why do we have annexes? I mean, at least I am not aware of one single invariable formulation or reason why people annex and they do not include it in an article. Sometimes there is a list, there is an illustrative list. Illustrations are given, which ordinarily in the form of national law you have only as an illustration. Illustration also have interpretive value. You have seen it before, national law, sometimes illustrations are cited by people saying that, well, this is an illustration, so my argument is akin to this illustration, so this interpretation should be. So whatever be the case, it basically is that we began with in the very first day, it is basically the intention of the parties. If parties want a particular shape, a particular structure of their manifestation of intent, obviously they would not sign it unless that structure is given. So it is basically their text. We are here as, you see, persons reading it. It is their text. They wanted in this particular form, it is there in this form. Whether we like it, we don't like it, we can only conjecture as a matter of study. Why did they not include annexes as articles? Why they only included it as an annexes? But once they have included it as annexes, our point is that this is not without significance.
Sir,
This
the annexes have significance of reference. While we are reading the main text or the provisions of that agreement, we can refer those annexes for our reference purpose.
It is basically when you are making, if you see pleadings,
Yes, sir.
then you will get the precise answer of this when you see the pleadings. Unless you have seen pleadings, any pleading, then you will not be able to understand. Let me tell you, if you see a lawyer's brief and pleadings, there is no difference, I can say emphatically, between an annex and an article. Whatever they will find in the text, they will cite it for their claim. The question is, from the lawyer's point of view, this is part of the text, isn't it? Isn't it a text?
Yes.
It is. The only question is, it is not named as an article, it is named as an annex. So if their claim is based, what you can say, it is basically, let me tell you, it is basically the contents of the annex which will determine its interpretive value. But to say that it has got, it is not a text, that obviously is meaningless, because it is agreed. It is also signed. It is also part of that particular text. It is not that you sign on the text and annexes will come later on. Where? If they are not agreed, they are not adopted, then and there, they are not adopted. It is part of the text.
So usually how we see it in not just WTO agreements but as other agreements, just clarifying the point of annexes, we do make a little note there in the start of the agreement that all the annexes which are part and parcel of this agreement or which may be taken to be
is ultimately it is basically the party's intention. It is for the parties to give expression to their intent. The expression of intent is also as much of a party's freedom as to choose a particular term or not to choose. To your specific, for instance, if you see anti-dumping agreement, for instance, or TRIMS agreement, for instance, investment measure, you have an inbuilt reference to an excess within the provisions. And sometimes you do not find inbuilt reference. So what we are saying is this: if there is no inbuilt reference, it doesn't mean
It's an understood thing. Basically.
It's there.
Slightly understood thing.
It is there. Subsidies agreement, there are an excess, you see, which are without any inbuilt references in the articles, but they are there. So the point here is, if there is a claim made on the basis of Article A, Article 1, and there is an annex also, and there is no inbuilt reference to annex, but if annex is relevant for the purposes of interpretation, the tribunal will read it. So it is not, if it has not been specifically mentioned or it has not been specifically relied on by the parties, as long as it remains part of the agreement, it will be read. But parties do make, you see, as far as WTO briefs are concerned, where it is basically mostly the international law instrument that you find annexes. It is not a normal practice that you find in the national legislation, national level. It's very rare. You have basically not annexes, you have schedules. Usually what you find parallel to the concept of annexes, you have schedules. That is usually, but whatever it is always referred, and claims are made specifically. And to that extent claims are made, there is hardly any difference between the main text and annexes. Then you have this Convention on Prohibition of Military or any other hostile use of environmental modification techniques, and MOD Convention. You also find the same, you see, technique where in this particular case, what you find is you do not have the term used. There you can see the difference in the term.
Understanding.
There the term used is understanding. But if you go to the Vienna Convention does not expressly prefer a particular term to which it would append the significance of a treaty. So if the text is called understanding, it is as much an agreement if other qualifications, other conditions are satisfied. So the point is this: why do countries refer particular text as understanding, as annexes, as agreements? We are not aware. At least one example that I know of is again the WTO agreement, I would say. But this was being drafted. In fact, the very name of the WTO was not there. It was, the initial proposal was to have an organization to be called as Multilateral Trade Organization. And you won't believe it, during the Uruguay round, for a considerable period of time, almost all parties has this almost final understanding that the future organization would be known as Multilateral Trade Organization. But suddenly, the term came World Trade Organization. Then sir, once Professor Muchkundulu was there, you see, in JNU, and he was giving this talk, in fact, I remember at that point in time. So some people asked, the US negotiators at one point in time started objecting that we would prefer World Trade Organization, not multilateral. So we have problem with multilateral. So when it was asked of the American officials, then what is your specific problem with the word multilateral? Because if the agreements are going to be the same, what is this problem with this sticker? You know the reply of the United States. He said multilateral implies in semantics that there are parties. It is a term which is basically generically coming from the parties. It has a reference, covert reference to parties. Whereas the term world is neutral. And United States finds it much more easy to have it passed by, ratified by our Senate, if we accept this term word. And you know the history of Havana Charter. The reason why it could not, people did not agree to it, other countries, was why? Because American Senate never ratified it. Indeed, it was never submitted for ratification because it was clear to the President that the Senate would not ratify it. So the question is, sometimes you do not, by giving this example, what I am merely telling you is that whether or not these particular reservations have any substantial value, but if they have some sense, some reservation, whether founded or unfounded, they will stick to it. They will say, no, you can't use this. Similarly, WTO, this understanding that you have seen customary rules of public international law, this is not called agreement. This is an understanding. Can you tell me if it is an understanding? It's not an agreement. This is an agreement. There's no doubt about it. So, whether it is an understanding or an agreement, if it is a text, the only thing that you have to see is whether this text was adopted, whether this text became, a text within the meaning of the Vienna Convention, and whether this text is enforced for the party concerned. If that is the case, whether it doesn't matter what you call it, is a treaty. So that is how you see these terms are. Then you have this Dayton Agreement that was the same, parallel to both Afghanistan agreement in the context of Bosnia. It also has so many, you have several agreements in the form of annexes. So another example of annexes is Dayton Agreement. The Annex 1A, Annex B, 1B, 1C, Annex 2, Annex 3, this is WTO sort of Annex 1A, 1B, 1B. So the question is this: if there is a text, it is no interpreter can unquestionably afford to ignore it in the process of interpretation if the parties have agreed and the text is enforced for the parties. Thank you. If you have questions, then please raise your questions so that we may address.